Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week, and I am very excited because we are doing Sonata Arctica's Ecliptica, which is an album I knew we would get to eventually, and part of me is a little surprised it took this long, but when you kind of gave me a couple of albums the week prior, I thought that this would be a nice fit. But before we get there, Chris, my man, how are you?
Very good. I just got back from a nice vacation. I did get to see you for a little bit, which was cool. And I haven't really listened to very much music in the last week because I was kind of just away and enjoying a little bit of the beach life. So I gave this album a listen prior to my trip, and then right before we recorded, just a little memory jog. But I don't even know if I really even needed to listen to it to talk about it, but I wanted to anyway.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it for sure. I just want to mention a couple of things that I kind of listened to this week that I think you'll particularly enjoy some of them. The new Brainstorm single was released, and they're kind of like a polarizing band. A lot of people love their old stuff. Some people are more into the newer albums. And it's been a while since they've released anything, but they released a new single called Glory Disappears, which was kind of cool. And definitely harkens back to the old stuff. So definitely worth a listen there. I had posted the new Iron Maiden single, which came out of absolutely nowhere. I was shocked when I went on YouTube and I saw that there had been a new Iron Maiden single. So obviously we already posted that. I won't be posting that again, but the writing is definitely on the wall. Did you have a chance to listen to that by any chance?
I definitely have not, but I have seen quite a bit of dissenting opinions about it. But I guess
I'm going to dissent as well because I loved it. So they can do no wrong in my eyes, but I'm a little bit of a fanboy, so I guess that's to be expected.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of typical of newer Maiden is that some people are just always going to be hoping for, them to sound like they used to, and it's just not really going to be a thing. So if you can appreciate, who they are now, then maybe you can appreciate this. I imagine I'll enjoy it. I just haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, I think you definitely will. It's different. It's almost got like a country vibe to it, but it works. I don't know. Somehow it works. I definitely enjoyed it. And two other things that came out that were definitely worth mentioning. The new Orbit Culture single, Flight of the Fireflies, it came out yesterday. We're recording this on Friday night. It came out yesterday on Thursday. Really good song, a great follow-up to their last album, which kind of got rave reviews. So if you liked what you heard with the last album, you're going to love this, I have no doubt. And another band that came out with a new album, and it had been 10 years since their prior release, is a band called Times of Grace. They came out with an album called Songs of Loss and Separation. And before I talk a little bit about that, their prior effort came out in 2011, The Hymn of a Broken Man. That album is phenomenal. The new one, I only listened to it once. I really haven't had a chance to digest it. It's kind of like a metalcore supergroup with guys from Killswitch Engage, the rhythm guitarist from Shadows Fall, and some other members as well. Not really my style. I'm not a big metalcore guy, but this album from 10 years ago was so awesome that I had to check out the new one, and it's pretty good. I think it's different from most of the stuff that I listen to, but it's really well done, and you could tell that they got something special here, and I'm surprised it took 10 years to release something new. I don't know if you're familiar, but I'll definitely post something this week so you can check them out.
Cool. Look forward to it.
And now we'll get into the reason why we're here. Sonata Arctica's Ecliptica, which came out in 1999. In certain ways, it feels like just yesterday that I remember you talking about this band and basically telling me I have to go check this out. How did you find them back in 1999 when the internet was still in its infancy stage?
I'm trying to remember who I spoke to. Just somebody that I had become friends with via AOL, who I would chat with, and I can't remember if it was Darren from Metal Ages, or it very well may have been, but there was just a few people that I used to chat with, and he had said, you gotta check out this new band, Sonata Arctica, this power metal band from Finland. and he sent me the first two tracks on the album, Blank File and My Land, and that's pretty much all I needed to hear to be convinced. So I remember when our friend Pat would order CDs from Altamira, if I remember correctly. I told him just blind, like, buy a copy of this album for you and Ralph and myself and whoever else. And just like, and he had never even heard of them, and he was usually the one telling us about bands. So it was kind of the first time I got to, share a new band with everybody, and kind of be the local discoverer, if you will. And everybody was completely blown away. I don't think we had any idea what kind of legacy the band was going to put forth, because all we really had to go on was this one album. But it was pretty mind blowing at the time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, let's be honest. The Stradivarius comparison is obviously strong with these guys. They were basically riding the heels of Stradivarius's, trifecta with Fourth Dimension and Episode and Visions, and then Sonata releases this album in November of 1999, and it's obviously heavily influenced by Stradivarius, and they would later actually go on to tour with the band and even do a couple of Stradivarius covers during their live shows. So obviously the influence is there, but for some reason this just resonated with me so much when I was a kid. I don't know if it was just the fact that it was so the vocals were so different, or the fact that the choruses on a lot of these songs were just so catchy. But it was love at first listen for me. And since then, the band has gone on to such a storied and varied history that I find myself always going back to Ecliptica, because it was, my first love of the band, and it was just it was that sound that bands were just coming out with, in the mid to late 90s, and a lot of bands have kind of moved away from that sound, and it's a shame, because this to me is like the heyday of power metal.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I feel like they took that Stradivarius influence, but they kind of turned it on its head and went with like an even faster, kind of more energetic style. I mean, like, you think that you listen to like Blank File and Myland, and you think like, man, this band is fast, and then it's like they double down on Eighth Commandment, and later on with Picturing the Past. I mean, even Kingdom for a Heart. I mean, there are some really, really up tempo songs on this album, and I just remember really sticking out at the time as something that felt really unique, and I just remember liking it immediately, and I couldn't wait to hear even more. And so I was quick to get the rest of the album and hear all the other 8 songs. And I think I eventually got the Japanese bonus track from Napster or whatever, or when I was in college, something like that, which was another really strong track too, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, this was just a really just, I thought this was such an important release in not just Sonata Arctica's history, but in power metal. And I think we mentioned, did we talk about was it the Loudwire rankings that when we were talking about Hammerfall last week, or was it a different magazine? Either way, Loudwire ranked this the 16th best power metal album of all time. So
hard to disagree. I got to be honest with you. When you really think back just at the pantheon of power metal albums, I think that's fair. I mean, you could argue it's higher. I'm not sure that I necessarily would, but the fact that you're even talking about it on a top list of albums, I think is indicative of how good this particular release is. I would argue it was all downhill from here. And I know that a lot of people would say that they really enjoy some of the newer albums, and I'm not going to say that I don't enjoy some of the songs, but just as an album from top to bottom, this was as good as it gets. Although, ironically, my favorite songs are actually on the follow-up album, which would obviously come out 2 years later, and that would be Silence. That album, I think, is a little bit not quite as balanced as Ecliptica, but some of my favorite, absolute favorite power metal songs are on that disc. Wolf and Raven being number one on that particular album. I think it's one of the best power metal songs ever. But that album is full of good songs. It's just not quite as balanced as Ecliptica. Would you agree with that, or do you think it's just as good?
I think it's just as good. In all honesty, I put the first three albums all pretty much on a similar pedestal. As far as the quality goes, I think it was after Winter Hearts Guild, which was their third album, where, Reckoning Night, while there were some really like songs that would definitely fit in with these first three albums, like, Misplaced and Ain't Your Fairy Tale and Don't Say a Word, you can tell with that Reckoning Night album that they were starting to they were kind of coming into like a change. And I think that with the following album, Unia, that would almost be like the beginning of the next era of Sonata Arctica style, I think, where they kind of took on a little bit more of a progressive sound and a little bit less of an in-your-face power metal sound. So, backtracking to what you said, like I think that I thought that Silence was more of a complete album than Ecliptica, but I think I would still say I like Ecliptica better.
It's close. It's definitely close. But where I differ with you is that I think that Winter Hearts Guild was a definite step down from those first two albums. If and I'm sure we'll get into the ratings, but Ecliptica and Silence are very close for me. They really are, and they're two of the best power metal albums that you're going to buy. I think that with Winter Hearts Guild, they took a real step back, and then it kind of just went down from there, just in terms of the complete package and obviously the overhaul of the sound. I'm curious how I would approach some of the newer albums had I heard them first or had I never heard the old stuff, because I'm biased and I feel like I'm always waiting for Ecliptica Part 2 or Silence Part 2, and we just never got that from the band because they just never went back there. But ironically, when you see them live, they do play a lot of the old material, and it's phenomenal, and the crowd goes out of their minds, and it's just a phenomenal live show and a live presence. So it's like, I'm not really sure why they changed so dramatically, and that would be my number one question if I was able to, if we got them on the show. I want to know why the change, but yet they still respect the past because they play a lot of the songs from the first two albums.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of really good songs on the albums from Unia all the way through their most recent album, Talvio. I just think that the albums aren't full of hits the way the earlier albums, and in my opinion, the first three albums, like almost every song is a really great song at the very least. Whereas like I feel like there's less of that later on. I mean, I still think they're a very good band. I think they get I think they get crapped on almost unfairly so by a lot of fans because of how much they've changed. And it's like, well, bands change. If you can't, kind of like with Iron Maiden, as we mentioned earlier, it's like, if you're going to sit and pine for the past, you might as well just go sit and listen to the old records and stop, buying the new ones and complaining about it, because it doesn't look like there's going to be much of a change. I think that people thought maybe with Pariah's Child in 2014 that maybe they were going to I feel like that was the closest album to the old style that they've come in the last 15 or so years.
Yeah.
It's probably my favorite of their more recent albums, but I mean, I popped on their, I think in Japan there was a greatest hits album that was all songs from Unia and forward, and I mean there's a lot of really, really good songs. It's just that they're not coming in as fast and furious as they were earlier on, and they're not really as power metal or as just straight power metal It's a little bit more nuanced. It's a little bit more proggy. It's a little bit more. I'd even say it's a little bit moody, like a little bit blue. It feels like they're experimenting with a little bit more different styles, and don't want to be lumped in as just this Stradivarius clone, power metal band that only does, one kind of song. So I think that's kind of, in a very brief way, kind of describing the path that the band has taken over the years. So it's really interesting to talk about this very first album where, we had no expectations and have pretty much zero idea of what direction the band is going to head in.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the way I would describe it is kind of Finland's answer to Edguy, in the sense that they write these catchy power metal songs. Obviously, great musicians don't really take themselves too seriously on stage, which makes for a fun live show. But some of the early tracks from both the bands, who both bands would obviously change directions later on. So there's really a nice parallel, I think, between both of their careers. But let's just, I guess, jump into it. I mean, the album starts off, right away with Blank File, with the drums, little drum solo that starts it, and right into the song. You know what you're in for 30 seconds into this album.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't really say it any better. I mean, it just hits you right over the head right away. Like, here's what we're going for. And once the solos kind of come in, you can just it's just Yanni and Miko, the keyboard player, just going back and forth. And was Miko even in the band yet? Or
so that's a great question. Tony Kakko, obviously the singer, gets the keyboard credits on the album. I'm not sure that he actually played the keyboards. I don't have the answer to this, but I know that Miko obviously joins the band in short order and would obviously tour with them, during those early and formative years. Unclear. I think there might be a little bit of an issue there in terms of who got the writing credits, but it certainly sounds like a Miko solo. A lot of those solos throughout the whole disc.
I mean, if that is Tony, then props to Tony, because the keyboard solos are really awesome.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, and it really it's striking right away with Blank File. Two of my absolute favorite keyboard solos on the entire disc are during the instrumental section of that particular song. But what I love is the trade-off between the guitars and the keys going back and forth. It's very reminiscent of Stradivarius, obviously, but it's just so good. And when in this particular song, the lower key that Tony sings in towards the end of the song is just a nice contrast to those vocals early on, which are just high pitched and in your face and screaming. It is the perfect track to introduce the album and introduce you to the band, because this is what you were getting for the next two discs and the EP that they sandwiched in the middle.
Yep, absolutely. It's kind of, I'm glad that it's the first song I heard by them, because it really was just a great way to just get into it. Just become I think just that one song, I became a fan for life of this band. I mean, it really made an impression on me right from the get-go.
What did you think of Mylan? Because it was obviously it's very similar. It kind of starts with more of a mid-tempo before it really kicks in, and it's a song that they still play live to this day. What are your thoughts? Because I have a little bit of an interesting opinion of this song.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time I liked this song even more than Blank File when I first heard both of them. I think it's a little bit more layered. There's a slower part towards the end of the song. I was convinced that there was a female vocalist doing like a duet towards the end of the song. And it was really just Tony doing like a really high part, recorded against his lower part. I just was convinced it was a woman singing. But I like this song. It's a little bit slower than Blank File. But I think that it has more melody to it, and it's more of a melodic tune. And I think it kind of is remembered as one of the more iconic songs on this very iconic album. And like you said, it is a song that tends to be revisited in a live setting. But yeah, I'm still a big fan of the song.
I loved this song when I first heard it, and I always had a soft spot in my heart for this particular song. But having gone back now and revisited it, it's probably my least favorite song on the album. And I think that's really more of a testament to the fact that every other song is really, really good. And maybe I've played it just a touch too much, but I find it to be just a little bit too repetitive throughout. But I will say this: when I think of a band that would come along just a couple of years later, and they're one of my favorite under the radar power metal bands, and that's Twilightning. This track clearly influenced Twilightning and another Finnish band, mind you, and their 2003 release Delirium Veil. It was so apparent to me that this kind of set the stage for what Twilightning would become just 4 years later. I'd be shocked if they weren't the number one influence in this particular song in particular.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. That was an incredible debut album, and didn't they never really followed up with anything that came close to that quality, in my opinion. I could definitely see that there's, especially with their use of that keyboard to guitar back and forth kind of style.
Totally.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, and the vocals are not terribly far off either.
No, no, and I think very similar to Sonata in the sense that the later albums after the debut, there are some very good songs, and then there's other songs that are a little bit different and kind of out there. You just have to dig a little bit deeper. Whereas this, I think it kind of hits you in the face. And obviously, speaking of in your face, Eighth Commandment, the third track. I mean, this one it's just put your seatbelt on because you're going to go along for a really fast ride with this one. It's a chorus that just sticks in your head. And I don't think it's Tony's best vocals, but for some reason they just fit the song perfectly.
Yeah, the thing that kind of blew my mind too is I'll never forget. I was visiting. I was visiting you guys after I had just started college, and I was visiting for the first time, and we went to New York City, and we went to the Virgin Megastore, which was an enormous record store in the middle of Times Square. And I remember buying the successor EP that was the next release that the band had come out with, and there was some live versions of tracks from this album, and I couldn't believe that a song like Eighth Commandment that is already really fast was even faster.
Yeah.
The songs that they had on that EP, the live tracks were played at an even faster tempo than on the album, which is insane when you think about this song in particular, how fast it is in and of itself. So I oftentimes think of that EP, and it was, I remember, oh God, I must have paid $30 for this 30-minute, thing, but it was like totally worth it because there was some new tracks on it, a couple of covers, but these live tracks in particular, definitely made it worth picking up. So, that's kind of what I think of when I hear this, but this song is awesome. And it should be mentioned that this is one of the two songs that was written by Jani Limatainen, who, would eventually leave the band. And I think left a major songwriting void in his absence when you think about these two songs, Eighth Commandment and Picturing the Past, which I think are the two fastest songs on the album, which is really saying something. And he would go on to make these amazing albums with Kane's Offering, which has Timo Kotipelto Stradivarius on vocals, and more recently The Dark Element with former Nightwish vocalist Annette Olsen, which their two albums, particularly the first one, are phenomenal. So he's still out there writing some really good stuff for other bands. It's kind of a shame that he had left Sonata Arctica and left that songwriting void, because like these are two of my personal favorite songs, not just on the album, but in the entire Sonata Arctica discography.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because if you didn't, I was going to bring it up later. think you could almost tie the decline or the change in style, if you will, to him leaving the band, right? Because he leaves the band in 2007, and that's when Unia had come out and really, I don't know, there was a real 180 in terms of the sound. I think it was a gradual with Winterheart's Guild and Reckoning Night, but with Unia, it was completely different than the 4 albums that preceded it. And I have to wonder if either he left the band because of the change in sound or because they just had, the classic creative differences that kind of drove them in 2 different directions, because it was right around that time when things really began to change for them.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I also think even prior to that, the departure of the keyboard player Mikko Harkin also, I don't know how much he was involved in songwriting, but I think that his absence also makes a difference, because I mean, he really was only on the Silence album as a full-time keyboard player, because by the time Winterheart's Guild comes out, he's already left the band, and Jens Johansson is filling in on certain keyboard solos. So, but I just think that lineup that they had during Silence, and they would record this live album, Songs of Silence, live in Tokyo, which is really, really awesome. I mean, just all the best songs from the first 2 albums, even a couple, I think they even play like some of their B-sides. Just, oh my goodness. Like, I thought this is my favorite lineup of Sonata Arctica, is with like Tony, Yanni, and Mikko, and like even Tommy Portimo, who was founding member, who was their drummer. That was like my favorite lineup of Sonata Arctica. So to have that full live album was really cool. So
yeah, it's kind of an underrated light album for sure. I remember when I bought that as well, and it checks off all the boxes for me. It sounds good, it's fun, it's like you said, everything is sped up, not just on the EP that would follow it up, but the live album as well after Silence. It's phenomenal. Let me ask you this, and I'll just come out and say it. I think Replica is another overrated song. And again, another song I used to love way back when, and certainly a well-placed ballad. It's time to slow things down. I think it's a little bit bland, and there's certainly another another ballad that we'll talk about that I think blows it out of the water just a little bit later on. What are your thoughts on Replica? Are you a fan of the song, or do you think that it's kind of one of the weaker songs on the album?
I wish you would have mentioned that during lunch the other day, because I think Brian would have slapped you. I remember Brian loved this. I mean, at the time, this might have been his favorite song on the album. I just know he loved this song. But I'm going to disagree with you 100%. I think this song blows Letter to Dana, which I'm assuming is what you were referring to. I think this blows Letter to Dana out of the water. I think Letter to Dana is my least favorite song on the album, and I think this album's great. The song is great. It starts out as a ballad. It kind of picks up with a little bit of a faster tempo with a guitar solo. It comes across fantastic live. I love this song.
Well, I'm going to differ with you. Like I said, it's not that it's a bad song. It's well placed. It's a good song. I just think it's a bit overrated. And I would completely disagree with you and Brian. It's just something about it just didn't click with me this time around, which is a little bit different. But I also think that I guess I knew what was coming up next, which is going to be my song of the week, Kingdom for a Heart. And that's part of the reason why. Kingdom for a Heart is probably one of my favorite songs on any power metal disc.
For one more
It's got the catchy vocals. It's got the catchy choruses. It's got the verses themselves extremely catchy. Amazing solos. This to me is the definition of like that speedy melodic power metal at its absolute best. Not my favorite Sonata Arctica song, but definitely close.
Yeah, this is. There was a time that this probably would have been my song of the week. It's not gonna be, but it's pretty damn close. But this is one of my all-time favorite Sonata Arctica songs. It's one of my all-time favorite power metal songs. The last time I saw the band play live, they played this, and I lost my mind. I was so excited to hear them play this live. It's an incredible live song. I remember after actually getting the full album that this was the song that blew me out of the water. I just was. It just hits all the notes you want a power metal song to hit. It's fast. It's catchy. It's just perfect. It's such a great song. Still not my track of the week, but I mean, probably a very close second.
Do you? Let me say it this way: when you hear the next track, like Full Moon, for some reason I have this as the first track I heard from them. Memory a little foggy there, but for some reason I feel like this is the first song I heard by them. It has that gallop, if you will, that we kind of talked about on some of the Hammerfall stuff and whatnot. This song, ironically enough, was the turning point in the album, because I thought that with Kingdom for a Heart and Full Moon, we actually get into like a meaty second half of the album. And when I say turning point, I don't know that I ever loved Full Moon as I did. Like this was a song that I actually did a 180 on, and now I actually love the song. I'm not sure I used to like it as much as I used to. Or I should say I like it more now than I used to. I just thought it was a really good song, and I think it really solidifies the second half of this album. And I actually think I like the second half to the first. It might be my new preference.
I like this song more now too than I did initially, and I think also too it's just having to follow Kingdom for a Heart. It was just like you kind of have to take things down a notch, which they do for about a minute, because this song sounds like a ballad, but then it just got, like you said, it goes into this really like awesome like galloping kind of tempo, and this is a song that I would, if I was a betting man, would say is probably their most played song from this album live. If I had to guess which song they played the most times from this album live, I'd guess it was this. And I mean, it makes sense. It's a perfect song for a live setting. It's another really good song, and it's after Kingdom for a Heart. I think it's good to kind of go back to more of a mid-tempo song and kind of like. When you hear someone say like we're going to slow things down, you're expecting a ballad. This isn't really a ballad at all. It's just kind of bringing it back to a little bit more of that My Land kind of tempo, I would say.
We strongly, obviously, disagree on Letter to Dana. I think it's a really, really great song. I don't know that I used to like it nearly as much as I do now, but I really, really enjoyed listening to it a bunch of times this week. However, Unopened provides the perfect contrast to the power ballad. It is so melodic and catchy, and probably the most underrated track on the entire album. I'm not going to say it's my favorite, but it's so underrated and so catchy. I would not be surprised if it was your track of the week. And if it's not that, I'm going to have to say it's Destruction Preventer, but I'm just going out on a limb.
Yeah, I mean, I never was a huge fan of Letter to Dana. I thought the lyrics were kind of cheeseball, and I still do. I think I like the song a little bit more than I used to, but and for me to say it's my least favorite song on the album is saying that, you know, it's an 8 out of 10. That's just how good the rest of the songs are. It just happens to be the one song that is kind of just the one I don't like as much. But yeah, Unopened is another song that I didn't think much of when back in the day. It also happened to be the one single from this album. But man, it's aged very well for me. It also, I think again of that successor EP with the live version of this. I love how they start the song really slow on the live version, and then they just kick into like this super speedy keyboard solo to get the song going. But yeah, this song is great. A really great contrast to like the ballad and the ballad before it. And this is a song that I really like quite a bit more than I did when the album first came out. And once again, it's almost like a lot of albums of this time, like, Somewhere Out in Space by Gamma Ray, which we talked about just as a for instance, or even the Hammerfall Legacy of Kings album we talked about last week. It's just that when you have so many of these iconic songs to start the album, I mean, the first 5 tracks on this album are like five like iconic Sonata Arctica songs. So it's kind of like, it's almost like you're reaching like fatigue by the time you get to this 8th song, in a certain sense, where it's like kind of like, well, how many friggin' classics could be on this one album? But going back all these years later and listening to it again, this song is just another incredibly strong song. And it's not my track of the week. As a matter of fact, the next track, Picturing the Past, is my track of the week. And this is a song also that I don't know that I paid too much mind to when I first picked up the album, but as years have gone on, the way that this song just starts, like this berserk guitar solo that would make Yngwie blush just to start the song, and then the keyboards jump in, and it is just a friggin' burner, like from start to finish. It's the fastest track on the album, which is really saying something. I don't know that I've ever seen them play it live. I'm not sure I ever will. I'm not sure they ever have. This song, Jesus, if you're in a bad mood, put this song on. This will pick you up. It is just masterful songwriting by Jani Limatainen, and again, just an example of what is missed by him not being in the band anymore. This song is an absolute just. Oh, I can't say anything bad. This song is just phenomenal, and really sets the table perfectly for this the longest and final track of the main 10 tracks on the album, not counting the bonus track, Destruction Preventer, which I will let you speak on.
Yeah, before we get there, I just want to say one other thing. Well, 2 things about Picturing the Past. When I say that the second half of this disc may be stronger than the first, this is the track that cemented it for me. So if I hadn't chose Kingdom for a Heart, I would have chose Picturing the Past. So I completely understand why you would make this your track of the week. I want to say one other thing. If you close your eyes, right, and you listen to that song, but you just imagine Tarja singing, tell me that doesn't belong on Oceanborn.
Yeah, I mean, some of the key parts for sure have very like old school Nightwish kind of vibes, and being that this album came out a year after Oceanborn, it's not terribly surprising. Another Finnish band. I could definitely picture that for sure.
Yeah, for some reason it just really resonated, and I'm not sure that I ever noticed that before, but to me, it was screaming that early Nightwish sound. But yeah, we get to the epic track, Destruction Preventer, and I use the term epic a little bit loosely. It clocks in at just under 8 minutes. It's about 7 minutes and 40 seconds. It's funny. I always heard this song and always thought the verses were just a complete ripoff of Black Diamond, right? So like that's the one thing I will always say. The verses to me may as well have been Black Diamond by Stradivarius, but they get a pass because the rest of the song is just so awesome. The choruses are great, and the solos are just so good and so different. And the change of pace throughout, which is unlike any of the other songs really on the disc, where they go from really slow to fast, back to slow again, and then picks up towards the end. I love it. And then obviously the fact that they end the song with the drum fill from Blank File and the keyboard outro from Letter to Dana. It's just a perfect ending track to this album.
Yeah, this was the perfect choice for the last song, not just because of its length, but just like you said, the style of the song. I think this was just another one of those songs I didn't pay enough attention to when I first heard the album again, because, it's just this fatigue of how many great songs are preceding it. But this is another incredible song that I think I probably like a little bit more every time I listen to it. Like you said, just lots of different tempos throughout, and I think it really just hits where it needs to hit and makes for a good change, something different that they hadn't done, with the previous 9 tracks, which for the most part are pretty power metal staples, and then with a couple of ballads sprinkled in. This was just, I think, showing that they had a little bit more depth to them, and again, it's still rife with the amazing keyboard and guitar solos, just like everything else. But just a great way to cap off this fantastic album,
and low key, Mary Lou, the bonus track, easily could have been on this album. I love just a phenomenal bonus track as like the cherry on top of all of this.
Yeah, this was the B-side on the unopened single, and it would be added as a bonus track on some of the foreign editions of Ecliptica. I heard this song a bit later after hearing the rest of the album, and it was just so awesome to hear another song from this band, because there were 10, at one point there were literally 10 songs that I was aware of. So getting this 11th song, and I stand by this stance that in those first few years of Sonata Arctica, they had B-sides that were better than most bands, A material. They have some just absolutely incredible B-sides, whether they be covers or just original material. This being one of them. I mean, this really could have been sandwiched in somewhere on the album. I mean, the album's already chock full of classics, but I don't even look at this song as a B-side, only because it's just that good of a song. So I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is they stuck San Sebastian on an EP. That's all I have to say about that. They stuck San Sebastian as a track on an EP. That song could be on any power metal album, and it would fit extremely nicely. So they really hit magic right out of the gate. I'll say this: they re-recorded the album 15 years after it came out. I don't know why they messed with it. I didn't see a need for it. Obviously, there had been lineup changes, but to me, I find it almost unlistenable. Just because, why would you? It's like, I can understand if you made Ecliptica Part 2, but to re-record the original when it was so perfect, I just never got on board with that.
Yeah, I didn't really dislike it, but I agree that it really was kind of unnecessary, because it's not like the album had like poor production or a drum machine or something like that.
Right,
kind of harkening back to when we discussed how Shadow Gallery's original album was a drum machine, and they didn't even go and re-record that album. So, I mean, sonically, the original version of Ecliptica still holds up, 20 plus years later. So I get, re-recording it, it's an anniversary, and it's arguably their most important album. But, yeah, I didn't think it was particularly necessary either. But I mean, if it was something where they were just fulfilling the terms of a record contract or just had some free time or whatever, if nothing else, it gave us the amazing I Can't Dance Genesis cover that they threw on as a bonus track.
If nothing else, that they did. Scale of 1 to 10. How high is this for you?
This is a 9.5, and I think that if Letter to Dana was a song that I really loved, it might very well be a 10. Just because I think every single other song on this album is fantastic, including the bonus track Mary Lou. I mean, it's pretty close to being a perfect album for me, and I just never get sick of listening to it. And it's almost like every time I do listen to it, there's a new song that becomes my favorite for that, that outing. So
Which is usually a
that's
testament to how strong an album is. And I've had that happen a number of times where, I listen to an album, I think I have a favorite song, and the next time I listen to the album, it's a different song. It's usually a testament to a strong album. It's a 9.5 for me as well. I think I would have given it a 10 in 1999 or 2000. It's aged very well, maybe a little bit, maybe it's gone down just a little bit because I've heard so much in the last 20 plus years. But it's darn close. And I have to go back and listen to Silence as soon as we're done because I just want to listen to all that old stuff again. I love it.
Yeah, I ended up kind of going down the rabbit hole before I went away on vacation and just pretty much listened to everything all the way through Reckoning Night. And it's kind of, it's interesting because they, I think in Japan they released two greatest hits albums, and one of them was, everything from Ecliptica to Reckoning Night. And then the second was everything from Unia up until whatever, was the newest material at the time. So I kind of consider those the two, if you were going to lump Sonata Arctica into two different eras, those are the two eras for me. I guess you could even say it was like the Yanni era and the non-Yanni era, even though Yanni was technically on Unia, but maybe he's already had one foot out the door at that point. But I think there's more meat on the bones in the early era, but I just think that there are a ton of good songs in that second era as well. I just think that there's just more, there's more songs on each album that just are unforgettable. And going back and listening to Silence again, it's like that album is fantastic. I put it right up there with Ecliptica, and I definitely would challenge you to give Winter Hearts Guild another listen if you haven't in recent times, because I think that it's very underappreciated. I just think Graven Image and Silver Tongue and Champagne Bath and Victoria's Secret and even the opening track, Abandoned, Please Brainwashed, Exploited, the Japanese bonus track. I mean, there's a lot of really, really good songs on this album. This is a really strong album, and it's fun to hear Jens Johansson have a few keyboard solos, and without a doubt that it's him because his keyboard is such a distinct sound.
On your recommendation, I will go back and listen to Winter Hearts Guild. I always struggled with this album, and I just remember, to me, it was, I think my love for the first two albums was so high that anything that wasn't that and made in its exact image and likeness was going to be a tough pill to swallow. I never got into the album, and I played it a ton when it came out. I mean, over and over again, and it just never clicked like the first two did. I'm going to go back to it. I'm going to go back to it this week, and I'm going to, maybe I'll report back next week and let you know what I think. I struggled with it, and I look forward to listening to it again. And one of these weeks, I think we definitely should do one of the newer albums just because it's so different. I just need to kind of listen to it with fresh ears. But we will not be doing that next week. Why don't you tell everybody what we will be doing next week?
Yeah, so this is something that we've kind of had in the works for a while now, and we were just waiting for the availability of a special guest that we're going to have, and his name is Andrew Gross, who is a beat writer for the New York Islanders for the Newsday newspaper, which if you're from New York, you're probably familiar with. If you're not, it's pretty much like Long Island's hometown newspaper. It's the newspaper I grew up reading, and Andrew and I kind of got into talking because he has a podcast that he does for the Islanders called Island Ice, which he does for Newsday. And he has a really cool feature where you can sign up and get text alerts directly from him, typically before news gets released, as far as, you know, transactions and you know, lineup changes, scheduling, things of that nature. And so, you know, knowing that he is a big fan of heavy metal and hard rock, and actually has experience playing drums himself, we just kind of got to talking, and he started listening to our podcast and had a lot of kind words to say. And he had said that there was an album that is one of his all-time favorites, and it's from a band called Blue Murder, and they released a self-titled debut album in 1989, and so this is going to be something where me and you do not have any, we've never listened to this before. We have no prior like knowledge base, or just, we really don't know what to expect. So I'm really looking forward to having Andrew come on with us, talk about an album that he probably knows front to back, and talk to us who are going to be experiencing it for the first time. I think it's going to be super interesting, and I'm very much looking forward to this. I think you would tend to agree.
I definitely would. I remember when we did the Opeth album early on, and you hadn't listened to that, and even the Haggard stuff, which I had seen live. At least we had some exposure to this. I have never heard a note from this band. Obviously familiar with the musicians in the band, but for some reason this particular album just escaped me, and I am very much looking forward to it and giving just an honest assessment of an album from, you know, over 22 years ago now, that I just have never heard. And I'm sure that we will have opinions on this, and I'm sure Andrew Gross is gonna have his opinions as well, which I'll be curious to see if they're the same. You know, it's like different strokes for different folks, but I definitely look forward to diving into this week, and I plan on giving it a number of listens because I want to give it its justice. I'm looking forward to doing that with him. Yeah,
for sure. It definitely sounds like it'll fit with our typical. I mean, it's probably going to be more heavy metal than listening to Rush's 2112. So, I mean, it'll fit in with what we typically speak about. So yeah, it's always fun to listen to something that new, even though it's, you know, over 30 years old, but because somebody that
how about my math? I'm saying 22, 32. Jeez.
Yeah. So, but just somebody that whose opinion I respect thinks so highly of this album, it leads me to believe that I think the both of us will end up enjoying it. It's just going to be a matter of how much. But I just thought it would be kind of cool to do something a little bit different. I don't think we've ever had anybody else come on with us before, so this will be the first time we'll, outside of interviews, this will be kind of our first episode with a third voice in the room. So, and being that Andrew does his own podcast, he definitely has a voice for this, and probably going to make us sound like jobbers in the process. But I'm really looking forward to having him on, and I'm sure we'll probably talk a bit about some other bands and things of that nature. But I'm kind of expecting him to kind of lead the way and maybe give us a little bit more of the the history and stuff, since I would imagine he could probably recite it off the top of his head.
I'm looking forward to it. And with that, let's call it a day here. I'm glad we got to do some Sonata, and I'm definitely looking forward to some Blue Murder next week. So enjoy the week, and I will touch base with you guys soon.
All right. Take care, buddy.
Take it easy.